welcome. First question is Philip. I'm going to unmute you, Philip, and then you can ask your question. Hello.
Hello, you two.
Hey.
I have a question about nonlinear. I'm doing it most days this year, like half an hour a day. And I mean, the last years weren't easy for me. So kind of my entrance into it was like my deep sadness I felt in me. So it was the first song. It was like the first time to let myself go over the day. I mean, I can't really run around in the office crying or something. And then, so it was the first song I cried a little bit, and then I got emotionally deeper and other things unfolded. And as you know, so things have changed a little bit for me over the last weeks. So I'm actually feeling happier and healthier mentally body than I've been doing for years. So the general sadness is gone, which is kind of a good thing, of course. But with this, I have really big problems getting into nonlinear because sort of my classical gateway into it doesn't work anymore. So it feels I'm way less embodied. I'm way more into my head. So when I'm doing it now, I quite often find myself thinking about the schedule for 5 minutes, still moving. Then I just realize, hey, why are you doing Outlook things while doing nonlinear? So it feels way less deep than I did before. And if you have any recommendations how to get back there.
Okay, well, I think the first thing to be said about nonlinear movement is that, of course, there's many different ways you can go for it, right? And so one of the ways you can go for it is that you just use it as kind of a mental hygiene. You know, you just go on the mat, and regardless if there's something actually happening or not, you're engaging with your body and you see and feel, you know, and notice whatever washes out. Right. And so that could then be at some points very little, and at some points it could be a lot, right? And that depends on how current you are with your washing out, so to speak, right? And there might be weeks of not much happening, and you know, little tiny bits here and there unfolding, and then you'll hit something again. So that's one way you can go at it. The way you went at it is you had a specific thing that you wanted to work with, or that was stuck in you, you know, the sadness and the kind of that feeling of, you know, wanting to be with that and release it. And so now that you are in fact, you know, doing well and exercising and there's all these good things happening for you, that isn't what's happening, right? Mm-hmm. And so of course you don't want to try and bring that on, so to speak, right? So there might just be a while where there is not much happening, because that has, you know, kind of subsided. Now, the interesting thing is that often things come in waves, right? You have something, you work with it, it goes, and then for a while not much happens, and then another wave comes. And so the beginning of a new wave or the beginning of a new unfolding is often marked by a certain kind of boredom, if you have regular practice.
Yeah,
right? Where you're just kind of, you know, you're bored and you're thinking of other things to do, and, you know, a cup of tea sounds good, and, you know, all of those kind of things. That's usually, when I have that in my practice, that's usually the sign that I'm at a ceiling, so to speak, you know, or a bottom, or however you want to say it. And when I get through the boredom, the next thing will unveil. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times people, and actually Steve has a whole, what is it, Sir Boredom and Mr. Mundane or something like that?
Something ridiculous like that, yeah.
It's such a good title, right? Because we'll post that for you when we send the thing out, because that is the thing. Sometimes you have to get really bored, or it might feel really mundane before the next thing pops. Mm-hmm. Or it could just be that things are good and you're just doing maintenance. Either which way, you know, just sticking with it is a good idea.
I've been sort of using the same playlist for a year now, and it really works well, or used to work well for me. Would you stick with that and see what happens, or really try new situation, probably try to do completely different music for a change?
I think that might be interesting.
Experiment.
Different music digs up different things. I think that would be a good way to go.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. All right. Tracy. Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
Morning. Or good. Guess that's not appropriate. I have a question about resistance. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Can hear you fine.
I'm noticing I have very little time right now because I have young kids and they're home from school. And I'm noticing that, you know, if I find a moment to get into something, I have this, I'm kind of like a freight train when I get into work. I'm very intense and I'm hyper focused. And it's been challenging because usually I use longer stretches of time to work and I kind of have to take it where I can get it now. And I'm just noticing some attachment to getting things done when I get started. And yeah, what else can I say about that? Nothing's coming to mind at the moment, but yeah, I don't know if either of you have any thoughts about how to work with. I think maybe it's resistance to not being able to do what I want to do. Resistance to what is required versus what I would, or attachment also.
So here's what I did here. You're having resistance to doing the things that need to be done. And, or is it more that you just have general resistance when you need to work, which you can only do in really small increments now because you have the kids at home and you're homeschooling?
Yeah. So no, I have kind of the luxury and the pain right now of being able to put my work aside and take care of my kids. But there are moments where I can pick my work back up and make progress. And, but usually I can't finish what I start or even get very far. So I guess there's feelings of like, why do I bother even trying? It's so painful, the getting started and having all this energy towards work and then this kind of derailing that it just feels ripe with information. And does that help a little bit?
Yes. Well, there's a few things, right? So one of the marks, I'm not saying that that's necessarily you. I'm just saying there's a few considerations around that in general, because I'm sure you're not the only one. So the mark of the perfectionist, right, is why even start when it can't be done perfectly, you know, or why do it if it can't be done perfectly? So often people who are very perfectionistic have issues with procrastination. They think it's procrastination, right? But really, it's why even get going, you know? And it has some people who describe it similarly, where you go, it takes so much to go there, and then it gets kind of aborted, and I can't get it done, and then, you know, what do I do with it? So there's one consideration around there. The other one is a consideration that it's something that plagues me often, which is open loops. And open loops is essentially anything that you haven't gotten completed yet that pops up in your mind at, you know, at regular intervals as a reminder, so to speak. It's a little bit like having a perpetual snooze button for a project, right? It's just every 10 minutes or so, it pops back into the mind. It pops back into the mind because you haven't outsourced it out of your internal reminders, you know, onto something external. And that can certainly happen if you go into a project and then you don't get to finish it, and you're somewhere stuck in the middle of a process that you weren't able to finish, but your creative mental process is still going in the back of your mind and producing these open loop reminders, which can be quite irritating and distracting and frustrating, because you can't do anything about it, but it's there causing some kind of a, irritation. So as far as open loops go, one of the best strategies for open loops is that when they pop up, you write down the things that have to be noted about them so they don't need to stay in your internal mechanism. And that might mean you start your project, you go into it, you get interrupted, you have to put it down, you make a few notes of things that you wanted to do next, and then when it pops up while you're with the kids, you just write it down. And then it pops up while you're in the shower and you just write it down, so you don't have to try and remember those things for when you sit back down.
That's helpful, yeah. It's more of the latter that I'm experiencing. And I think maybe a little bit of defeatism in that everything feels like an open loop, and I'm making lists that are never going to be checked off, but I think that I still need to do it.
Yes. Yes, I mean, there's things that you still have to do regardless of, the futility of it, and also regardless of the circumstance, right? And then there's other things that are not that realistic to deal with right now in this particular moment for a number of reasons, right? So I think the key there is also to know really what needs to be rolled forward and what needs to be paused. But yeah, it is definitely, there is a certain sense of futility and frustration that a lot of people are experiencing right now, because you're essentially trying to stir a ship, or or wherever you want to say it, and you don't know where you're going, and the coordinates of where it's going are constantly changing, and very few of those are within your control. I mean, some people have a better time with that than others, and some people have better circumstances because they don't have, schools and jobs outside of their home that constantly change the goalpost. It's just internal stuff. But if you have, in your case, children and a husband with a job and all of those things, you are flying blind essentially, and your instruments are not really oriented towards what they usually would be oriented towards. And that causes a great deal of frustration and fear and anxiety and all kinds of things. And the only thing you can potentially do about that is orient further out, like meaning orient to a bigger coordinate, so to speak. The purpose of your family, the well-being of your children 20 years from now, who you are as a being, your spiritual disposition, what you see yourself doing emotionally, spiritually. Those are easier things because they stay fairly consistent regardless of what happens in between.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
That's helpful.
Mm. I don't know if I'm pronouncing this correct. Is it Jinhua? But I'm going to unmute you and you can tell me. Hi.
Hi. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Let me see if I can bring my video on. Oh, hi.
Hi.
Let me see. So I'm fairly new to your teachings, and I just signed up for the Wild Woman's Way course. I'm very excited about starting that. And so hopefully this question is not coming out of left field, but I know that you've done some work with SAND, with the Science and Non-Duality group, and so hopefully there's some familiarity. But so I've been, for the past several years, very focused on the non-dual path, you know, and of course that path is all about, we are not the body, we are not the mind, you know, we are this consciousness, the emptiness. And you know, lately I've been feeling like there was something missing in that teaching, which of course is the human experience, and so the embodied experience. And that's how I came to your teachings. And what was one of the things that was really eye-opening for me was when I heard you say something about the feminine essence is about movement, and the masculine is more comfortable in the emptiness and the stillness. And so my question is, you know, when it comes to movement, how do we know when the movement is coming from, you know, like an authentic expression of whatever is, you know, that's coming from like an intimate connection with the body and with the present experience, and when it's coming from, when it's more of an avoidance tactic, you know, like that's kind of more coming from the inability to be with oneself, you know, and to be with that stillness. And I don't mean, when I say stillness, I don't necessarily mean physical stillness, you know, but I think there can be movement where you're still, where there's still this connection to like the core, you know, and it's very grounded and centered, even if externally it may look very frenetic. So yeah, that's my question, is the discrimination of when the movement is authentic and when it's coming more from the inability to be with what is, you know, like as a distraction. Right?
That's a really interesting question, I think. And in the context of something like the moving what you're feeling practice, which you've seen in the online course, Nonlinear or something like that, or in other contexts, really, it's this interesting, this word authentic. Of course, I haven't asked you what you mean by it, and I'm not asking you to define it, but just for food for thought, sometimes the authentic expression is avoidance. Sometimes what's happening is you're not okay or comfortable with what you're feeling, or you're feeling turbulent or scattered or uncentered or something like that. If you want to be kind of radical, you can move that. You can move, if you think, am I avoiding or not? Then you can move the question, am I avoiding it or not? You can move that confusion, that sort of not quite sure if you're avoiding or not. Move avoidance. Or if you're feeling scattered, or move the scatteredness. If you're feeling like you want to jump out of your skin, move the feeling of wanting to jump out of your skin. If you're feeling numb, you can move as numbness. And so there's this sense in which nothing is safe from nothing is off limits, and it's all authentic in that sense. Now, of course, it may not be comfortable, it may not be pleasant, but if that's what's happening, then, and you're doing a practice which is moving what you're feeling, for instance, or you're in meditation, let's say, doing a certain practice of that type, then it doesn't matter what's happening. Whatever's happening is what's going on now. I sometimes think about music. You know, I used to play guitar, and so one of the things that we'd do was we'd go to jam nights, blues jam nights, and it would be a whole bunch of people would go to a pub. There'd be you could get up there and play, you know, if you wanted to, right? It's called a jam night. And it's really interesting because you could sometimes hear, for the less experienced guitarists, you could hear who they were influenced by. Often as a musician, you're looking for your authentic voice, a voice that somehow doesn't sound just like somebody else. But up until you get to that point, you just sound like a person sounding like someone else. And there was a lot of people whose authentic expression on the guitar was sounding like Eric Clapton or sounding like Stevie Ray Vaughan. I mean, that was their authentic voice. Their authentic voice was a guy who's listened to too much Jimi Hendrix, if such a thing is even possible. And only over time does a musician integrate influences to such a degree that he begins to digest them, and then can say something maybe a bit different, even if it's a different way of combining those influences, that something slightly unique comes out. But yeah, so I think this authenticity thing could be reframed and say, whatever is happening, whatever I'm feeling, I'll move that. And there's no wrong answer.
Yeah, I wonder if, if part of it is because I've been sort of indoctrinated in it, perhaps, by non-dual beliefs, thinking that stillness is somehow better than movement. So I wonder if there's still in me some deconditioning that's needed, in terms of not favoring one over the other, and to see that movement is just as, like you're saying, I think, authentic as being still. Somehow there's still some judgment in me that says, if I'm not able to be still, it's because I'm, not, that there's some sense of lack, or something that's missing that I'm trying to then fill with activity or distraction and stuff like that.
Yeah, I see what you mean. Totally. You don't have to lose your preferences. You might still prefer stillness or those non-dual states. You might still prefer that. And that's fine to prefer it. You don't have to like what you feel to move it.
Mm-hmm.
If your practice is to move what you feel, you don't have to like it. You don't have to prefer it. You can move the shortfall between your preferred state and the state that you feel. You can move that too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's all fair game in that sense. Yeah, I think that's all I'll say.
Yeah. I want to add a few things from a totally different viewpoint to that, which is that when you describe that stillness, right, the non-dual stillness, that's a kind of a place of wide, relaxed, open kind of dissolution, right? That's what it feels like. And so it's easy to imagine that anything other than that state isn't that, right? But when you break it kind of down into the tantric principle, right, then what we look at is that we essentially have aspects externally, meaning us and someone else, and internally, that are often described as masculine and feminine, which is not to be conflated with men and women, of course. But, so we have these aspects of us that are moving and creating and generating. And then we have the aspects of us that have some structure, and they know where it's going. And there's a certain kind of built-in observance, the observer, and then the moving part is the part that's being seen from the observer, and those two things together create a play, right? And that's in tantra, they call it the tantric play, or the play of the structure and order and chaos, or however you want to say it. And in that play there is this friction, this tension that's incredibly interesting. Sexually it's interesting, creatively it's interesting. And then out of that friction comes a moment of just, that moment when it all comes together, right? And there's nothing left. And it's a non-dual moment, so to speak, right? That the way you describe it. But in order to get to that place, you can enact the two dual, the two pieces that then make the thing. And so you can come at it from sitting still and being, observant and all of that. But you can also come at it equally as fully from the place of movement and creation and unfolding. So it's not an either or. There's preferences. And as Steve was saying, you might prefer to come at it from the stillness, from the meditation, viewpoint, or you might come at it from different times at different moments, but they are both equally doable and both equally applicable, so to speak, right? And I think the thing that somehow trips you up there is that you were saying you don't know the distinction all the way between throwing off, is what I sometimes call it, right? Throwing off the energy, feeling things in your contemplation or your exploration, and not wanting to feel them, and then getting busy and moving and doing stuff so you don't have to feel the thing that's there, right? And Steve was talking about that in the nonlinear movement, how you just then move that, and that's then an authentic movement and so on. So there is a popping out through doing, but that's not the same as moving, right? You can also pop out in meditation, meaning you can meditate to not feel, right? You can meditate to numb out. You can be busy to numb out. So both of those are possible, and both of them then wouldn't get you to where you want to go.
Thank you. That's very helpful, both of you.
Thank you. I'm going to read a question that somebody sent in. I have a few questions that were sent in. One's very long that I'm just going to paraphrase, where Alessia was asking, she's noticing that there's people who are very, they're suddenly taking a lot of risks, that they're suddenly, their entire approach to life has become one of risk-taking, right? They go off their diet, they do odd things sexually, they expose themselves to situations that they usually wouldn't, they drink more alcohol, they do things in their work situation that are considered risky. And so she's noticing that there's a lot more of that happening. And she's also noticing that she doesn't want to do that. So she's wondering, is she just boring and risk averse, or have the other people suddenly kind of gone a bit off the deep end? So that was Alessia's question. And I don't know, Steve, if you want to say a few things about that from the survival standpoint.
Yeah, well, it's a thing. It is the thing that can happen. It's theorized as being a way of reducing the perceived threat by acting as if it's not that big a deal. In one of my pandemic interviews, I did a series of interviews with people about the pandemic. And in one of those, Chuladasa made this point. And I see this around the marina. There's many people here. I live on a boat in a marina, and they have different approaches. You know, some people are holed up in their boats, looking through the curtains and so on. But other people are continuing to gather in groups. One guy insists upon closing distance with people and saying, he's been saying to them, we're all going to get it anyway. He'll come up close to someone and say, we're all going to get it anyway, we're all going to get it anyway. So he likes to do that because there's a place everyone walks, and he likes to close the distance and say that. So there's all sorts of strange behaviors going on like that. Another thing, and maybe Michaela can talk about that, certain coping patterns and trauma-related mechanisms can also play into self-destructive tendencies, including high-risk sexual behaviors, which is a well-known consequence of trauma. From a survival point of view, it's good to think of things from an impulse buying point of view. When it's late at night and you're laying there with Dorito crumbs in your beard and you're scrolling through Amazon and you think, I'm going to buy this. Look at this. Oh, it's a mug and it's got the face of a gorilla on it. I need that. So usually when people are compulsively spending, they say, well, if it's not an essential purchase, then wait 24 hours, stuff like that. So that's one of the ways you can mitigate things. You can make a list of things you'd like to do that are risky and crazy, and then see if you still feel like doing it in half an hour or next day, sleep on it. Anyway, that's just some things there.
Yeah, and then to add that with the trauma responses, right? So in general, when there's threat to the human being, there is, excuse me, when there's threat to the human being, there's nervous system responses, and most of them, you know about them. There's fight and flight, and then there's also freeze, right? And so fight has as one of its results an innately more risk-taking response, because essentially the organism has decided in that particular moment to face the thing head on. And in the head on facing, there is risky, more risk taking. You're essentially flying into the face of the thing. And that can be, you know, everything from being a little bit more aggressive than usual in general to actually doing behaviors that are a lot more risky than one would usually do. And that can definitely happen in the fight response. And then of course in the flight response, because Alessia was asking, is she just risk averse, right? It could be that you are just risk averse in the sense that you don't want to sacrifice your well-being, or your, you know, you have children or things like that. In general, the more dependence you have and the more you are engaged in maintaining certain aspects of life, right? So getting food going, keeping the kids safe, dealing with the animals, whatever, the more you have to be risk averse because you have to feel beyond that particular moment. So that's one way, but it could also be because you're in a flight response and you just don't want to deal, you just want to get away, right? Because that's what the flight response is. Run as fast and as far as you can. And if, you know, if you can't do that, then it often has kind of a withdrawal feeling to it, where you're just trying to get away. And then of course in freeze, you might just cope very differently, where you know, everything kind of comes to a temporary halt. You're not going forward, you're not going backwards. So that doesn't really apply that much to that particular question, but I just wanted to mention that for completion's sake, that in freeze, it's kind of a hunkering down and waiting to see what has to happen, and kind of keeping the body very still and the emotions kind of frozen, so that there's very little showing, right? Because in freeze, it's considered, you have to imagine it a little bit like you're hiding in high grass, and you definitely don't want to move or make sounds or anything till the threat has passed, and the body in freeze kind of shuts down a whole bunch of capacities in order to maintain that. So those are the kind of 3 things to consider in trauma.
Hi everyone.
You just do this instead of pressing the button.
So I have this question. Lately, I noticed that I became very inactive. Like, I want to read a book, I want to do something, but I do nothing. Like, I can spend days lying and doing nothing, and I want to motivate myself. I know that it might be like coping with the stress, but it has become like a habit lately. And it worries me a lot because I'm a very active person. I did a lot of jobs, you know, and I don't know how to help it, because days spent and I can lie in bed and do really nothing, like even lazy to cook a food. And it just, I don't know why, like this is my brain protesting this situation, or me subconsciously, but I really want to do some things and I can't do anything. It's like, I don't know.
Yeah. Huh. Yeah, I'm sure you are not you're not the only one, right? So remember how I said earlier that in freeze, you become very, very static? That sounds very much like a freeze response, right? Now, it could be a few other things as well, right? Sometimes when people tend to be really, really active and super, super busy, when they slow down, the pendulum swings all the way, right? Meaning you become a vegetable for a few days. But then typically what happens is 2-3 days in, your natural get up and go comes back, and then, you know, you get doing something. If after a few days it's not coming back, then we can pretty much assume it might be a stress, you know, or trauma response. And so yeah, and that's probably what happens. And so at that point, you're gonna have to move your body, you know. And
yeah, of course. And like also, like I like before coming to this point, I had like before I was very motivated to do something, and then I couldn't finish it up. I was like, yay, I'm so hyper, I'm gonna do this, and I started, but I couldn't finish it up. You know, there was this prior like situation. Now I'm like nothing, like
right. Yeah, so you've gone into full-blown freeze. So in nonlinear, we always say keep on moving, even if it's just a finger or a toe, right? So even if you just lay on the sofa and you do this, and Steve is demonstrating the feet. Yes, even if you just do this, and then and then you know, just like move your spine a bit, and even if you're laying down, just start moving your body to bring the unfreeze response out in the body. Right.
oh, thank you so much. I'll try.
Yeah.
Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed and uncrossed all the time, right? So you can't start just with this, but you have to keep a bit of movement going, or you're just gonna get stuck. And then, like you said, it becomes a habit.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
You may not have the energy to do a lot of movement, which is why we say fingers and toes. So you're laying a kind of like vegetable, and then you notice that you're being a vegetable, and if you're not going to be able to get up and do a full-on something or other. So then you just look at your hand, start wiggling your hands, or look at your toes, start wiggling your toes, you know, waggling your eyebrows, like that, something like that.
Slowly,
and you're not going to clear it all in one go either. The
But
idea is just to do something in the other direction, something to keep things a little bit moving.
Thank you. I'm trying it after we finish the Zoom session.
All right, I have one more question that was emailed in, and it says, my question is, what are your suggestions? What are the quickest ways to get back into pleasure in my body after I feel angry? Well, one could say, right, one could take a wide perception on pleasure. Like we've just started this course called Awakening the Pleasure Body. And in Awakening the Pleasure Body, we kind of expand the definition of pleasure from just the sexual to the sensual, and then to just general aliveness and creativity and fullness in the body. And so one could say that the absence, that anger in itself could be a strong sensation in the body, right? And then the absence of the anger could be a pleasurable sensation in itself, because it's different and it's the absence of something that feels very hot or tight or full on. So I think that you don't necessarily have to do something to get pleasure back always. I think it's more important to widen the definition of pleasure and then pay attention to other sensation than anger, and mark that other sensation than anger as a part of pleasure. And so there might be relief, or there might be some sadness, or there might just be a lot of physical awareness. You want to mute that. So there is no worries. So that's one of the ways to deal with anger and wanting to come back with pleasure. Now, another option, of course, would be to feel the anger fully and then pivot to something of the sensual nature, and focus on the pleasure in that. So having a cup of tea, cooling off, smelling a flower, whatever can be consciously done to turn away from anger towards something else. But I think it's probably more useful to just notice the absence of anger as a pleasurable sensation. So that's what I have to say about that. Hannah, let me unmute you.
Hey.
Hey.
Lovely to see you guys. Yeah, I have a question to do with fear. I feel when I go outside, when I go shopping, or in a park, or wherever I go outside, I can feel this, it's like I feel like a program of fear which is being installed on me. It's just, you know, from all the images, the guards in front of the shops, you know, they've got up walls in front of the cashiers now, you know, these plastic walls, and, you know, all the signs on the floor, keep 1 meter apart, and just, and also the way people are dodging you on the street and keeping distance. Yeah, it really feels like some kind of a installment of fear program being put on me, and I really don't want to take that on. It's like, and it's not me. So are you denying what's going on? So I've been thinking, and I said, no, I see what's going on, and I know what's going on, but still I refuse, or I don't want to take on that program of fear, and which I also feel in the air. And I was wondering if you have any tips how to, not to absorb that.
I remember when we in the UK voted for, had our vote for Brexit, which, for those of you who aren't aware, maybe in America, leaving the European Union, right? We had a vote for that a few years ago. And I happened to be in the UK at the time. I'm rarely here. Well, I'm here all the time now, but I was rarely there at the time. And I was there. The vote was to leave the European Union, which perhaps you know. And so I took a train from where I was, where the boat is, which is in the middle of England, down to London in order to catch a flight. And the place where the boat is a place that would have voted or did vote to leave. So everyone was very happy about it. And the place I was going to, London, is a place that voted to stay in the European Union. So as I went on the train, as I got further south, the feeling of fear and shock thickened. And it did feel like a kind of cloak of fear, programming of fear, like you said, it's a spell of fear, you know. And it's certainly the case that if someone is in a room with you and is very depressed, or down in the dump, can get you down in the dumps, right? Sometimes being in the room with certain people can cheer you up. So it does seem that we have a way of picking up on the moods of others. And certainly with lots and lots of media, depending on the media you watch, it's quite frightening. And certainly people are quite frightened, and people are acting quite frightened. And there's this fear. Now there's two questions. On the one hand, it's how justified is it? And on the other hand is what to do about it. As for the first question, I'm not going to address that necessarily. We all have to make our own decision about how seriously we're going to take the situation, whatever it might be, and what precautions that we choose to take, and so on. But one thing's for sure, being in a certain sense irradiated by the fear is not going to help your decision-making process or your health or your well-being. So fear is a very intelligent emotion. It's an alert emotion, very good emotion. But chronic fear all the time is draining. And it reduces your ability to think clearly and so on and make good decisions. So there's a few things you can do. Number one, recognize your baseline, the part of you that's Hannah. And then to try to stay in touch with that baseline as you move through the world. And then you will notice things coming from the outside, stuff that's not yours. Relax the edges and let that other stuff kind of come in and out of your field, but not stick. The problem comes when that emotion's from the outside. And if you don't see it coming, very often you can't tell what's yours and what's not yours. Then you start to get into trouble. That's the first thing, is to watch your baseline and track that. The other thing is, of course, to do things at the time that can counteract the things coming in from the outside. That would include movement. This is why things like, I saw you were using your mala before. You know, something like a mala is not a bad idea if you're that way inclined. So you have something moving, something going in your hand, in your pocket maybe, something that is emotion. Mala, maybe a little bit of mantra, because I know you're a Buddhist, so you know you can do that. And that guards the mind also. and it keeps the body moving. It's quite useful. But if you're not into mantras and malas and so on, just to keep on moving. And then it's also extremely important to clean up afterwards. There's going to be some stuff that sticks, and also your own stress level about having gone out there, which justifiably you're on high alert, because you can't just walk around Hamburg like it's normal, because it isn't normal. So you're on high alert as well. So you've got stress there. So it's important to, at the end of a trip out, to try to relax and try to shed some of that excess stress so that it doesn't build up over the days. Great way of doing that is to straight away have a shower.
Yeah.
That's a really good way of doing it. Having a shower, washing yourself, and you're transitioning in that shower from outside to inside. And there's other things you can do, of course, like you can do shaking or bouncing, or you can do dancing or something like that, or maybe you can meditate, or that's I think to your own taste. What sort of things you might like to do. But it's nice to have something like a shower so that you're transitioning clearly from the outside to the inside. So you have your protocols. I've talked about this in previous calls. You have your protocols in place. You know how you're dealing with the threat. That's the thing I said I wasn't going to bother to mention. And then you go out and execute your protocols, keeping your eye on your baseline. When you come back, you shed anything that's clung to you, including your own stress response, and rinse, wash, and repeat. The thing that people have to watch out for is the accumulation. It's the accumulation. Strong people in particular have to watch out for that. Things accumulate, and you start to, before you know it, get pulled a little off center. So it's extremely important that you treat yourself like an expensive sports car and give yourself maintenance. Not self-care to pamper yourself and, bring out your inner radiance necessarily. Not only that, but also survival. Also, your warrior needs to oil the axe and sharpen the crossbow and all that stuff. It's a serious business. It's not an indulgence. It's an essential thing. If you want to stay healthy, stay strong, and stay sane, and stay on top of things as best you possibly can from your side throughout such a difficult situation as this.
Okay.
Very much.
Thank you. And thank you everyone who came on live, and thank you for posting your questions. We'll do this again pretty soon. We're also going to offer a few live online courses, so we'll roll those out next week. So you'll stay posted for fun new stuff, and have a wonderful weekend.